Welcome back to the final leg of our journey. Today, we're battling the Elite Four and the League Champion. It's a special long episode today. I've trained my team a bit and I've put Sunny in the party as well, mainly because she deserves to tag along with us. She did help out along the way. Most of the commentary today is going to be focusing on the Pokemon games themselves. As we conclude the Johto arc of this particular story, I'm looking back at the other games as well. I will quickly note, just in case I didn't, this guy can teleport you back to New Barktown because you can't actually fly back to Johto from the Pokemon League in this game. You also can't get to Mount Silver until you've beaten all the gyms in Kanto, so he is actually helpful. There were some changes made in the remake, so he's not going to be helpful. Anyway, let's prepare. We'll grab a few items. Let's see, some hyper potions will definitely do the trick. Stock up on those. Grab a couple of revives. Full heals. We ought to be good to go. I'll sell a few things so I have a bit of money on hand. Let's see, I probably should have been using the amulet coin. Well, to be honest, I should probably put some of these in the PC. I think we should be right for now. I can do that off screen. Anyway, let's get going, and let's also take the time to discuss previous Pokemon games. I think for the first opponent, I'm going to be switching Dash to the fore. So, you've heard me discuss this game quite a lot. You've probably heard me discuss X and Y, mostly complaining about it. So I'm actually going to point out what I think they did right about X and Y while we prepare to battle Will. I'm probably not going to do any voices for the dialogue. What X and Y did get right? I think they got the soundtrack right for the most part. I didn't like the Gym Leader and Elite Four battle themes. I thought they tended to sound a bit like rave party music, and I'm not sort of heavily into techno and things like that. But most of the soundtrack was incredibly beautiful, and when they got the Pokemon designs right, they really did get them right. Anyway, Will of the Elite Four uses Psychic-type Pokemon, and Xatu is his first one. We're going to start off with a Defense Curl. So X and Y does have a lot going for it, some beautiful graphics, great music. Oh, Confusory. And when they got the Pokemon right, they were really, really good. I'll definitely give it that. I still consider them my least favourite mainline Pokemon games, but even they have a lot to enjoy about them. I think I'm probably going to heal Dash just for the sake of it, because I know Confusion will backfire on me. So what do we got? We've got... yeah. Psychic's probably going to do a lot of damage. Anyway, next up on the list of my favourite games, we're going lowest to highest, mainly because of Diamond and Pearl. I tend to rank the Sinnoh games a bit lower. They're not personal favourites, but I do like Platinum. Platinum elevates everything. Gone for Confusory again. Platinum just made things a fair bit tighter. It got rid of most of the flaws Diamond and Pearl had. Their pacing was incredibly poor, and the game speed itself was very, very slow. The surfing speed, for example, was the same pace as your basic walking speed, improved in Platinum. Navigating through the snow is still a pain in the backside, but a lot has improved in terms of the pacing. There's a bit more to do, some more challenges, and the game is a bit more balanced overall in terms of levels. I do like the technical changes the Sinnoh games brought to the series. I can definitely appreciate that, and Dash is running over Jinx pretty easily, snapped out of Confusion. The technical changes are mainly what I like about the Sinnoh games. I'm not a huge fan of Cynthia, which may come as a surprise to a lot of people. In the first game, I think she was sort of put in just as a roadblock in a sense. Her team is just a huge collection of strong Pokemon, that are designed to be a good challenge, and she is a good opponent. But it sort of doesn't really say, this is who I am. It's sort of like the developer said, this is a massive challenge for you. We're going to make the team as tough as possible. With like Lance and Blue and Steven before her, you got the sense that they had a strong team that still stayed true to who they were. I think it's sort of more the developers stitching up Cynthia in that sense. We get the idea that she's basically just an obstacle in our path. And speaking of an obstacle in our path, aka the one who gets in our way, is a beautiful piece of music from Xenoblade. Well worth listening to. So I'm kind of ambivalent on the Sinnoh games. It's not that I hate them really. It's that I like other games a bit more. I think that would be a fair assessment. Alola is probably next because I like the Pokemon. There was some pretty good music in there, but I just hate the pace of the game. I genuinely can't stand it. It feels too slow most of the time. The pacing does drag out a bit. And I really, really hate the forced tutorials. Pretty much all of Melee Island is a tutorial, and I'm really annoyed by that. I've been playing for 20 years. I know what I'm doing. I want an I know what I'm doing button, so that I don't have to be taught to catch Pokemon again and go through all the basics of battling like a total newbie. I like having the options there for new players, that is fine, but I want them to be options. I don't want them forced on me. Anyway, Xatu is going to be our first Spotlight Pokemon, so let's pop that up on the screen as it appears. According to several Pokédex entries, Xatu can see the events of the past and all possible futures at once. The blank stare on its face comes from the fact that it's somewhat horrified by seeing all those bad futures. Kind of sucks to be Xatu in that case. It also sucks to be Xatu in other ways, unfortunately. It has a really difficult time learning moves in Generation 2, with its relatively narrow move pool having to put up with the fact it learns moves every 15 levels. Naruto learned them every 10, and that was a real pain when trying to train one. On top of that, Xatu's stats are pretty well balanced, but that's kind of a problem. It's not really good at anything. There are Pokemon with much better special attack and a little bit faster. Xatu is still fairly dependable and has a pretty distinct typing, but unfortunately it's mostly there for novelty value. It's kind of hard to find, which is a sad problem with many Johto Pokemon, and when you do find it, it doesn't really stand out that much. Nonetheless, if you give it a try in later generations, when it has a much bigger move pool, it can be pretty useful, and it's always nice to try something different. And with Xatu's Spotlight done, let's throw a Shadow Ball at it. So yeah, that's probably the main thing that I'd probably have Alola and Sinnoh tying, because I really don't like those tutorials. They are bothersome. But I can definitely say that I do enjoy a lot of the Pokemon. And Will's using a max potion, we should be a bit faster still. I admit I also liked what they did with Lucamine's character in Sun and Moon compared to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. I liked that moral ambiguity. It really made you think how much was her and how much was Nihiligo's influence, and what sort of impact her husband disappearing had on her. They'd sort of changed her from a really interesting character to sort of this classic well-intentioned extremist type, and I found that really annoying. Amnesia. Let's check Dash's moves. I think I'm not going to worry about Amnesia at the moment. We can forget Amnesia. Interestingly, Amnesia isn't forgetting absolutely everything about who you are. In reality, it's actually sort of more a bit of an impact on short-term memory. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but it's not you completely forget everything about you. Anyway, we have beaten Will. So there we go. Now Dash probably isn't going to fare too well for the rest of the Elite Four, but he has done his job. So let's put Torture up front because we know what's coming next. Bug types and poison types. Give Dash a bit of a top up and we will be good to go. So then after Alola, it's probably Kanto. I like Red and Blue. It is worth noting that a lot of the technical issues that plagued Red and Blue were due to some very clever programming, bizarrely enough. Don't need to do that. Because of the necessary programming shortcuts they took, constantly reusing data values and everything to try and fit everything onto the one cartridge, there's no memory protection. So you can basically break the game. You can have it play a completely different game, using various glitches to perform the arbitrary code execution, and it'll still work. For the most part, it is actually pretty technically impressive. There are some genuine issues, for example. You'll also see that Torture has Swift in his moveset at long last. The special stat was a big issue. That made Psychic types and any Pokemon with a good special pretty broken. The lack of counters to Psychic types was also an issue. I actually did some research, and to be honest, the best way to try and take down Alakazam, for example, is Jolteon using Pin Missile, and the optimal circumstances are still Pin Missile hitting 5 times. So Alakazam has an advantage, unless the broken critical hit mechanics come into play. There were still bugs and everything, that's true, but a lot of the major ones were actually due to clever programming shortcuts. It has its flaws, but it's the first in a series. It's got to have those flaws so you can build on them and improve. I do like a lot of the old Pokemon, but I sort of forget a lot of them as well, so we're switching to Muck. I'm going to bring Gibson out for that one. There's a bit of nostalgia behind liking it, but at the same time you can't afford to let nostalgia cloud it. Like, I've been honest about the flaws that Gold and Silver and Heart Gold and Soul Silver had. So let's drop Earthquake on that one. So yeah, very good groundwork that did need polishing. I like the fact that they did balance the Psychic type in Gold and Silver, even if I was annoyed at the time the games came out. But I do think Game Freak has gone a bit too far in the constant nerfs they've given to Psychic types. Venomoth back to Torture. Unfortunately, Koga is pretty easy because you can chew through his team with a good Fire type. So it's that mix of nostalgia and sort of the fact that it's the real building blocks, and the fact that Fire Red and Leaf Green were, for the most part, pretty good, that I'd consider Kanto sort of in that middle spot. It's one I like, but there are other ones I like more. And I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for saying this, but I like Unova a bit more than I like Kanto. More on that after Crobat's Spotlight pops up. Everybody knows how annoying Zubat can be. Its purpose seems to be to swarm you en masse and spam Supersonic, which for some reason has a much higher accuracy when the AI uses it. Or at least it seems that way anyway. Golbat was basically every bit as irritating, but with better stats. However, when Generation 2 rolled around, things got a lot better for the Zubat line. Crobat's stats don't improve a lot from Golbat, which can be a little bit disappointing in some fields. It's not overly powerful, but it does have one great trick up its sleeve: its incredible speed. At the time, it was one of the fastest Pokemon out there. While a couple of other Pokemon do outspeed it, Crobat is still pretty reliable in that field. It can hit fairly quickly, crippling the opponent with some pretty useful moves, and it's only got better as the generations have gone on. It's well worth using because if you actually put the effort into evolving a Zubat, then raising its happiness, Crobat is a fantastic ally. It shows that anyone can have some good potential hidden in them. You just need to find the way to bring it out. So with all the info on Crobat done, let's explain why I like the Unova games. I like the fact they did something different. I like the fact they provided a deconstruction of Pokemon. I do think they had a few problems in the story, namely ignoring everything Heart Gold and Soul Silver did in order to make everything work. But, as Torture electrocutes Crobat, I probably should have switched to Polari, but that's okay. I do appreciate the fact that they at least tried something different. I liked being able to use the new Pokemon. I enjoyed their variety. I liked getting to see what's new in a region. And they didn't necessarily trade on nostalgia, which was a bit of a problem in later ones, probably due to the backlash against using all new Pokemon. They were familiar enough. They were similar in certain cases, like Roggenrola is basically Geodude. But they did enough different, and I really appreciated that. Now, Bruno's going to be the big problem for me. Fighting-type Pokemon take care of most of my team. I probably should have done some level grinding with Sunny. But I'm going to swing and hope. Torture is my best bet. I didn't mind Black and White too, they were alright. I didn't really like the rival, and it's not necessarily because he's a friendly rival, it's because his personality was really obnoxious in my eyes. I liked the big variety of Pokemon, I thought that was pretty good. But I still like using a lot of the Unova Pokemon. And away we go! Third battle of the Elite Four. So I have a fair bit of fondness for Unova for its willingness to do something different. Hoenn, which I put as second in my list of favourite Pokemon regions, did things different by necessity. It had to do things differently because it needed a massive technical overhaul. It provided a lot of boosts because, well, you pretty much had to. They sharpened things up so that there weren't as many glitches from the Game Boy era. And let's see, best defensive option is Gibson. But it was... I can see why it was a bit frustrating for people because they thought all their Pokemon were going to be disappearing. Until they made Fire Red and Leaf Green, we didn't really know that there was going to be any connectivity with previous generations in any way. But I do think that Hoenn had some really good environments. They look great in terms of general technique. Gibson is probably going to be my best bet still because I can hit the weaker physical defense. But yeah, overall, I just like what Hoenn did. I like a lot of its Pokemon. I often like the original soundtrack a bit more often. I don't really like the orchestrated version as much for some reason. It's just strange. But in some cases, the original soundtrack works. Like the Reggie battle, for example. In the remakes, it's sort of this grand, let's get ready to battle a legendary Pokemon moment. In the originals, it had this awesome sound, almost like a warning siren coming through. It made you feel as though you were messing with something you really shouldn't be, that you had awoken something beyond your control, and I really, really liked that. I got into Steel types because of Metagross. I've been a proud user of Steel types ever since. Steven's one of my favourite characters, and I'm also quite fond of Flannery, even if she doesn't quite take the top spot from Sabrina. In all honesty, I just had a lot to love about Hoenn, and I didn't really think about the issues with connecting with previous generations at the time. I didn't read the box and I thought you could. More on that after we switch back to Torture and get ready to take on Machamp. And of course, there's a spotlight for Machamp coming right up. When it comes to the fighting type, Machamp is the Pokemon I think of, and it's also the fighting type I tend to use the most. There may be fighting types out there which are faster, which can use secondary types to their advantage a bit better, but Machamp has a lot of versatility. It has access to a pretty wide range of moves, and they are going to hit pretty hard, especially from Generation 4 onwards, where it can access things like the elemental punches from move tutors. Machamp's physical attack is sky high, It has pretty solid HP, and its defences are reasonable as well, so while it is a bit slow, you know it can take an attack and it will hit back very hard. Furthermore, Machamp's standard abilities will give it a pretty good boost. With Guts, inflicting a status condition will only mean it hits you harder, and no guard can allow it to throw out moves like Dynamic Punch, catching opponents off guard and leaving them confused. No matter when you use it, except maybe in the first generation when Psychic types were a bit broken, Machamp is going to be a very reliable ally, which has a wide variety of moves at its disposal. I'm very fond of my shiny Machamp. I found it as a shiny Machoke in Sun and Moon while trying to find Jangmo. Seriously, it took me 4 hours to find one Jangmo and I found the Machoke before it. Hit it with our best and see what we can do. If I get a burn on it, that will be a big advantage. Okay, so it missed. That's also very helpful. But Machamp does have reasonable special defense, as you saw. So back to what I was saying about Hoenn. I did honestly think there would be some sort of connectivity. I didn't realise that you couldn't because of the vast technical differences. But that didn't actually bother me very much for some reason. I just sort of rolled with it. I was really happy when they released Colosseum, and really happy with the Fire Red and Leaf Green. I think Generation 3 overall had a fair bit of innovation, and I wish there were more games like Colosseum at XD. And we got the burn. You may insert the relevant Nicolas Cage line here. And thanks to that burn, we'll wrap it up with Flame Wheel. But obviously, I've said everything I need to say about Johto. It's my favourite. As for the flaws in each one, Hoenn, I find issue with its level curve. I don't think there's a great variety of fire types, which does annoy me, but it's better than Diamond and Pearl had, because if you didn't pick Chimchar, you had a choice of Ponyta, 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 or for added variety, Ponyta. Fortunately, that was improved in Platinum. It did make Flint a little bit more difficult in Diamond and Pearl because he threw different Pokemon at you. But I still like having that selection because I'm not a huge Fire-type trainer, but I don't mind using them along the way. I do like Torkoal a lot, to be honest. But I did find that the level curve in Hoenn was a bit annoying. It was still kind of shallow, kind of like it was in these games. And I was frustrated that they didn't fix that in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I was frustrated with the fact they added way too many unnecessarily dark elements in various subplots and side areas. I like the abandoned ship rather than the whole fiasco with Seymourville. And I really didn't like the Delta episode. I just found that frustrating. Zinnia came across as incredibly obnoxious and unlikable, and the whole thing just sort of felt like, okay, let's see, what would happen if Michael Bay was allowed to direct a Pokemon game? And the fact they didn't draw enough from Emerald was incredibly annoying. So, we're facing Karen next, and I'm not sure who's going to be my best option. I'll probably give Polari a go. So yeah, that's what I didn't like in all fairness. I hated the fact you didn't have the full battle frontier. I think quite a lot of people did. The level grinding issue and the high level evolution requirements in Unova, that's the main issue. The minor issue is probably the fact that they just ignored everything Heart Gold and Soul Silver sort of established, that there's a massive community, people and Pokemon are brought together through their mutual interests. You can make friends with gym leaders because of your mutual love of Pokemon. I really appreciated that, and all those things were sort of just chucked out the window in Black and White because they kind of had to make Team Plasma's argument work. Yes, I can see why it sort of looks like a potential glorified dogfight, but some people have compared Pokemon battles to humans playing sports. We we enjoy them. It's often stated that Pokemon get enjoyment out of battling each other. It's kind of like playing rugby. Rugby is violent. Let's put it that way. I probably should have kept that X special. I'm admittedly not a rugby fan. I much prefer soccer, but there's still the chance of getting injured in soccer, or as I prefer to call it, football. Really, you take on a risk, but you do have a lot of fun with it. That's basically what sport is. There are risks, and people have been grievously injured, which is regrettable. But there are lots of regulations to make sure that we don't injure each other. This is going to be a bit of a grind, and I do apologise. But yeah, I didn't really like some of the characterization aspects in Black and White 2. They were good, they did have a pretty good plot, and there was a nice continuation, but at the same time, a few of those little issues did pop up. I think they're pretty solid games, but I think the extras with Black and White 2 were probably the biggest issues. I didn't like having to beat the game for the challenge mode, and easy mode was kind of pointless, and we're already going for the Spotlight Pokemon for Karen's battle, so I'm switching to Mersey. So we'll quickly switch out, and finally, long after the radio tower, the spotlight is on Houndoom. While the power of many Pokemon native to Johto varies, Houndour and Houndoom are Pokemon which will make you incredibly annoyed at the fact you can only find certain Pokemon much later in the game. I would love to have these available early. This line, along with Tyranitar, could really get some mileage from their Dark-type moves, since they had very high special attack, the highest special attack of any Dark-type Pokemon at the time. And that also allowed them to use a pretty mean flamethrower. Houndour evolves really early into Houndoom, and it's fairly fast, so it's very frustrating to note that you will only find these in Kanto on one specific route. If you can find a way to get your hands on them early, you will actually find a very dependable Pokemon, as you can see from those pretty good stats, and its Mega Evolution is fairly capable as well. While I am not normally a big fan of Dark types, I don't go out of my way to use them very much. I will admit that I would love more opportunities to use Houndour and Houndoom. They have a fantastic design which honestly looks really impressive and conveys that sense of menace, and they're pretty strong in battle as well. Give them a try, you're not going to go wrong with this one. So it's sort of mostly nitpicking and quibbles with Black and White and its ilk. They were pretty solid games, but they did have a few flaws here and there. I think it was sort of different that was the big issue with Black and White. When it comes to Kanto, I've pretty much cited all the glitches and things like that. They're the originals, so you kind of have to give them some slack. I didn't like the fact that you couldn't use Pokemon in the national dex in Fire Red and Leaf Green until you'd actually got it. It would have been nice being able to use Crobat. It's still essentially the same game, just tweaked a little bit. There weren't heaps and heaps of improvements until the post-game, and I think they did actually polish things a bit more in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. So it's almost like Fire Red and Leaf Green are polished, but they're not quite as polished as they could have been. I did like the Sevii Islands though. That was a pretty nice touch, but having to go out of my way to get Moltres was a little bit annoying. Oh, and Mersey's burned, that's no good. Is Body Slam actually going to get the KO? Just. It's a fairly even matchup. So Vileplume, we're switching back to Torture. Yeah, so that's sort of the main issues I have with the Kanto games. Probably the over-representation, the various glitches and issues in the first generation, and some of the changes being a bit controversial. Or maybe not controversial, but a bit unusual when it came to Fire Red and Leaf Green. But again, they were probably just sort of experimenting a little bit. I didn't really like Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee that much. I would have preferred an updated Kanto remake with the old mechanics, but that's just me. I think Dash can actually take on Gengar, or should I put Gibson against Gengar? Gibson's pretty damaged. Oh crap, I've got the... I thought I can... Well, I'm an idiot. Thought I'd press down a little bit to switch to Dash. My fault. I'd criticize you for still having Lick, but Torture had Leer in his moveset until he learned Swift during level grinding. Anyway, so back to what I was saying. I've pointed out the issues I have with Kanto, and Gengar's just committed suicide. And Polari can wrap things up against Murkrow. But yeah, I've mentioned the issues with Kanto, the issues I have with Alola, forced tutorials, the fact that Pokemon are really, really slow, and the annoyingly gimmicky elements in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Ultra Necrozma really doesn't need to exist. It's almost like a big middle finger to Nuzlocke players, and that's it. It's just needlessly overpowered for one thing. The fact that most of the Pokemon in Alola are slow does annoy me a lot, but it's not too bad. They do actually have a pretty good variety, but the speed is a major issue. And the fact that you can only acquire some of them late. Probably should tie that back into Unova, and that's a big weakness. The fact that because the developers didn't quite get things right when it came to the experience system, they thought it would make level grinding really, really easy. A lot of Pokemon evolve late, and it's very difficult to use them. I'll heal up my team before we go and battle the champion. We all know who it is. Mersey needs that. I'll be leading off with Polari again. Gibson's probably not going to do much, sadly, but he will wind up pulling his weight throughout Kanto. Especially against the first gym we can challenge. I'm going to give him the opportunity to go to town there. Do we have any super potions left? Yes, we do. Probably could have used some of those. Anyway, I've mentioned some of the issues with Sinnoh, and I've ragged on Kalos a lot. But all that is said and done. There's a lot to experience and appreciate no matter which Pokemon game you play. They all have their advantages. If your list of favourites is different from mine, then that is completely alright. As long as we're civil about it, we can have a lot of fun discussing things. I mean, much as I do rag on the Kalos games, I did pretty much enjoy playing them. I have had some very good teams along the way. So to be honest, really, I can't say there's one I genuinely hate. I hate certain aspects, but I don't hate the games overall. Let's take the last steps in our journey through Johto together.
I've been waiting for you. Wedge, I knew that you, with your skills, would eventually reach me here. There's no need for words now. We will battle to determine who is the stronger of the two of us. As the most powerful trainer, and as the Pokemon League champion, I, Lance, the Dragon Master, accept your challenge.
Cue the battle, and cue the awesome cape. According to the remakes, Lance actually buys a lot of capes at the Celadon department store. Pretty impressive. Kind of like Lando Calrissian in Solo having a wardrobe full of capes. I'm going to say that yes, I enjoyed that. It was a good throwback to sort of classic Star Wars style. Alden Ehrenreich did a good job as Han. You needed to see Han develop into the character he has become, and I think he did a good job there, but basically Donald Glover just had a license to be smooth as Lando, and he did a great job. Polari is taking out Gyarados pretty easily. So there we are. That's one down. And Dragonite. This is Mersey's job. He's led with his strongest. So this is the final spotlight for the episode. We're up against our final opponent on the Johto arc. Dragonite is the original pseudo-legendary Pokemon. A fairly powerful Pokemon with some pretty good stats all round. Its physical attack is really impressive, allowing it to use a wide variety of moves as the generations have gone on. However, it can also throw out some pretty powerful attacks from its fairly decent special attack, and it's pretty bulky as well. That relatively low speed is its only major weakness as such, well, that and a crippling weakness to ice-type attacks, but that was in a sense a form of balance. Dragonite couldn't really get that much mileage from its Dragon-type moves until Generation 2, and it got even more from Generation 4 onwards, with Outrage being one of the most powerful moves out there. Compared to its fellow pseudo-legendaries, Dragonite doesn't really look that fierce. In fact, it looks downright friendly. A lot of adaptations have actually tried to make it much more menacing. However, I like the fact that Dragonite is friendly. It knows how much work you've put into it, helping it reach its full potential. And why shouldn't it be happy with you if you've been a good trainer? You put in the hard work to get Dragonite and you're going to have an incredible ally. I cannot speak highly enough of this Pokemon. It's one of my favourite Dragon types out there. Admittedly probably third place after Kingdra and Flygon, but still it's one I love using. They don't actually play the animations. Sorry to just divert from everything, but I honestly thought they would wind up playing the little animations because I'm used to that happening in later games. And then they did change things a little bit. In the Alola games, they just have a little icon on the screen showing which weather condition is in effect. And down in one. 4 times damage, plus same type attack bonus. Lance's Dragonites were never going to stand a chance. Take him on, take him down, Mersey. This one's a little faster. That's a bit of a surprise. Maybe there are speed ties or something? Who knows? But either way, even affected by paralysis, she is gonna power through. I've brought out an Alakazam with Ice Punch against Lance, and that does wonders too. So we'll finish off the last Dragonite. Still raining? It is worth noting all of Lance's Pokemon know Hyper Beam. And due to the lack of Dragon-type Pokemon, and Lance having to rely on Dragon-like Pokemon, one can technically argue he's a Flying-type specialist in this game. Mainly working on technicalities there. Aerodactyl. You've done your best. Take a break. Polari, step forth. And don't worry, Gibson, you're going to get your turn soon. We'll probably let you run riot on the SS Anne. SS Aqua. I'm an idiot. And Polari is just going to tank a Hyper Beam. Does a fair bit of damage because Aerodactyl is pretty strong. And I really need better moves than Thundershock. I'll have to give him Thunder. Might see... Did I sell Rain Dance? I'll have to see later on. And there we are. Aerodactyl is down. Polari levels up. Apologies for not giving you as much time in the spotlight, Gibson. You did pretty well, though. Well, to be fair, you handled Bruno pretty well. And against Charizard, in terms of stats, we're bringing out his equal. Let's go, Torture. Starter versus starter. Let me just quickly check. Pack. Oh no, I did sell Rain Dance. Ah, well. And let's go with Thunder Punch. And he's gone with Hyper Beam. He's had pretty bad luck with that. 2 out of 3 have missed. It has a 90% chance of hitting. I feel your pain, Lance. One final strike. And Torture brings it to a close.
It's over. But it's an odd feeling. I'm not angry that I lost. In fact, I feel happy. Happy that I witnessed the rise of a great new champion. And in fairness, you're not actually going to get to keep that title, so I will still be the champion. That's part of the reason why I'm happy. Because you don't get acknowledged as the champion until Generation 7. You got a prize in Generation 6, but that was about it. Phew. You have become truly powerful, Wedge. Your Pokemon have responded to your strong and upstanding nature. As a trainer, you will continue to grow strong with your Pokemon.
And DJ Mary rushes in, chewing out Professor Oak. Ah, Wedge! It's been a long while. You certainly look more mature. Your conquest in the league is just fantastic. Your dedication, trust, and love for your Pokemon made this happen. Much better than my grandson. I still like ragging on him about that. Your Pokemon were outstanding too. You can't forget them. Because they believed in you as a trainer, they persevered. Congratulations, Wedge! You're now the champion, even though your team is slightly lower level than Lance's. And Mary wants an interview, but...
This is getting to be a bit too noisy. Wedge, could you come with me?
It's worth noting Professor Oak can enter that room in the previous games, so he might have been a champion at some point, who knows?
It's been a long time since I last came here. This is where we honor the League champions for all eternity. Their courageous Pokemon are also inducted. Here today, we witness the rise of a new League champion. A trainer who feels compassion for and trust in his Pokemon. A trainer who succeeded through perseverance and determination. The new League champion who has all the makings of greatness. Wedge, allow me to register you and your partners as champions.
And there we are. Everything is saving. We have Polari, who joined the team after the tech fiasco. Torture, the main man from start to finish. He worked hard to get where he is, and he's a worthy champ. Mersey, our loyal transport, and a great friend who's been the Dragon Slayer. Dash, the little guy that could, the slayer of Miltank, the long boy. And Gibson, the sturdy and reliable defender. Sonny, you were there for emotional support, but you're gonna be back on your feet soon. And then there's the complete spanner who just stood there and gave orders. Never mind the playtime. There are still a few issues with the emulator and that. And now, let's wrap it up with the credits. You're going to see quite a few familiar faces along the way. Shigeki Morimoto works with Game Freak and has had a cameo in recent games. Ken Sugimori, the legend behind the artwork, cannot praise him enough. Of course, there are plenty of other people helping him along the way as well. He has a great team. A few dancing Togepi, which I didn't use. Junichi Masuda has done a lot of good work on the music. And of course, he lends his name to the Masuda method. Satoshi Tajiri made it all happen in the first place. There we have Elekid, which we might get around to seeing later on. We can only acquire it post-game though. Because you can only acquire Electabuzz post-game. Bit annoying. Hey, Sentret. I'm really happy I stuck with Dash, to be honest. He's put in so much good work. I was really surprised when he took out Miltank, and he has been very helpful along the way. Not sure if that should be Schumacher, but... we're almost there. Hiroshi Yamauchi's been involved in plenty of games along the way, though we can't forget the work of Satoru Iwata, whose single-handed work not only made this possible, but also allowed them to include Kanto. Thank you very much for your contributions, Mr. Iwata. May you rest in peace. And this is the end of our journey. We've come a long way from when we began. Next time, we're heading off to Kanto to complete the challenges there. Thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you in the next installment of our scenic tour through the Kanto region, where we take the SS Aqua across the seas to Vermilion City.